The man pulled the frozen human tongue out of the fridge. He'd planned to prepare it as sashimi for the wealthy guests waiting outside, but to his shock, the tongue was covered in dense clusters of herpes sores. This absolutely wouldn't fly with these elite guests, who were famously strict about ingredient quality, and there was no substitute for this particular dish. Just as the two of them were panicking, trying to figure out what to do, a woman suddenly burst in. A windfall like this, they weren't about to let it slip away. Soon, the woman's tongue was being served at the table. Since the sheriff had said he wouldn't eat tongue sashimi, they served him a pear sorbet instead. Nick wrapped a small note around the spoon. After reading the note, the sheriff found Nick in the bathroom. Nick told him the entire truth and confessed that the sheriff's missing nephew was one of the very dishes being served tonight. Hearing this, the sheriff was completely stunned. A violent wave of nausea surged up inside him. At that moment, a sudden knock came at the door. The host called through the door, asking what was wrong. Stepping out, the sheriff lied, claiming his stomach was acting up. To dispel any suspicion, he enthusiastically waved goodbye to the tycoons in the dining room. After leaving, the sheriff didn't actually go. While the watchers weren't paying attention, he slipped around behind the garden to meet up with Nick. The two of them entered a hidden chamber where the woman whose tongue had been cut out was still lying. When Nick lifted the sheriff's nephew's head out of the pot, the sheriff finally completely believed him. Since his phone was still charging back in the room, he asked Nick to retrieve it for him. Taking advantage of the after-dinner chatter, Nick strolled through as if everything were normal. It was clear the guests were thoroughly satisfied with the evening. Only Chris seemed to have caught on to something. After charmingly seeing the guests off, Nick quietly slipped into the room and retrieved the sheriff's phone. Meanwhile, hearing a knock at the door, the sheriff assumed Nick had returned. But the next moment, a man stepped in holding a chainsaw and sliced him clean in two. Blood drenched the entire floor. Nick had no idea what was happening in the hidden room. It wasn't until he pushed the door open that he realized something was very wrong. Chris didn't bother explaining. He simply got to work, dismembering the two bodies himself. Nick knew now he had fallen straight into the wolves' den. There was no way out. The only reason he was still alive was because of his exceptional cooking skills. Laura told him they'd been receiving emails from many wealthy clients lately, all of them wanting to try his cuisine. To prevent Nick from running off, Chris implanted a GPS tracker in his neck. Then he laid out the location of his next assignment. A few days later, Nick arrived in London. This time, he was allowed to operate on his own, and the man in front of him, trying to strike up a friendly conversation, had no idea that he had already become Nick's next ingredient.